Hi viewers, Wiki Talks again. Today we are going to discuss an important aspect of Russia-Ukraine war, and that's the induction of Leopard 2 tanks and whether it has succeeded or failed, and what could have been done by the Ukrainian and NATO forces to improve the employment of armor in the battle so far. Now, mainly I'll be focusing on the technical aspects, the training part of it, the operational environment, of course, how the terrain and ground has affected the operations, and both sides, how they've employed firepower and other assets available to them. And then, of course, what are the strategies being employed by both sides, and whether NATO and Ukraine has a chance to do better. Now, as far as Ukraine's theater of operation is concerned, I still maintain that it has been used as an info ops theater by the West and the NATO. And it requires a detailed discussion, but suffice to say that you cannot convert entire country into information operations. You should focus on the war effort and what happens on ground. Now, there are certain issues related to the induction of Leopard 2 tanks. So far, there have been, I think, closer to 100 tanks have been inducted, and they have come from different NATO countries. Mainly, it's the German technology, it's one of the state-of-the-art tanks, and it was supposed to be a game changer. Now, as regards the training part of it, if you want to train, especially if you are shifting from a 3-man tank crew that was used by the Warsaw Pact and Ukrainian forces and the Russians to a 4-man tank, it requires a lot of effort in terms of training. A tank crew in which you have a driver, basically a gunner, a commander, and an operator, would require substantial amount of effort and time to become masters. For instance, a master gunner in any training would require actually a couple of years. You cannot become a master gunner without training on tank for less than 2 years. So it means that you require concerted time effort to train the gunner. And if you are doing it during wartime, and depending on what's the quality of officers and soldiers, especially if you look at Ukraine, they have been almost now second line of officers and soldiers which are fighting. There have been severe losses. If you follow Colonel McGregor or Scott Ritter, they have claimed that probably Ukraine has lost more than 300,000 troops, KIA and injured. So it means now the troops which are fighting, some of them are from the old guard, but mainly they are new recruits or new officers and soldiers. So training would require concerted effort. Then we come to the terrain and ground. Now, as far as Ukraine's main theater of operations in the Donbass region or the Zaporozhye region, or even in the north are concerned, it has limited time available in terms of campaign season. For instance, you can employ it when the snow freezes and you have hard ground, and then of course there is a period where there is a slush, which is generally March, April, May, and then you have drying of ground, and then June, July, August, September becomes another campaigning season, and then the snow starts falling again. So you have to choose your operation in between that. Now, as far as the weight of tank is concerned, Leopard 2 with 120 mm rifled gun basically is a very heavy tank. It's more than 60 tons, and if you compare it with Warsaw Pact tanks, like the Russians, the Ukrainians have always used tanks which are below 46, 47 tons combat weight. So power to weight ratio is important, and then is the bearing capacity of the tank, that how the terrain affects. In case of Ukrainian theater of operation, we have seen a lot of Leopard 2s getting bogged down. So that has been also one major factor which has affected the operations. Then of course is the operational environment, which is, I think, critical. If you look at the firepower available to both sides, especially the artillery, then of course is the air dominance, which side dominates the air, because when you're employing armor, you require at least favorable air situation. It means that in the theater or the sector where you are employing armor, you have favorable air situation, and you are not really concerned about Air Force coming and striking you. On that side, I think Russians had dominance. Firepower, I think it is 1:10. Look at Russian use of artillery, because if you are employing armor, you got to have spaces where you can rest and recuperate and concentrate. But if the artillery is disturbing your concentration area, you are on the move all the time. So it I think creates a very serious problem. Then comes the logistics in terms of, let's say, if a tank gets hit and its track is destroyed, or its sprocket or idler wheel is destroyed, you change it very quickly. So there got to be a chain of, the light aid detachments. We do it within battalion and regiment level, and then you have at brigade and division level some supply of spares, and there's got to be a chain which can basically recuperate armor. So on both I think aspects of logistics, Russians are doing much better. Then comes the employment of drone warfare. Both sides have used it extensively. Initially, it was projected that probably Ukrainians had an edge over the Russians, but gradually I think Russians have been able to build up their drone capacity, and we've seen the Lancet drone coming and striking with immunity. They have been even striking the bunkers, the concentration areas of armor, and of course the artillery, etc. So top attack is now becoming very, very crucial, because tank can protect from a ground-based weapon system with some immunity because of some additional armor plates or certain kind of spaced armor. But when it's being attacked from the top, you cannot have the turret with very heavy armor. So it means that drones can be very, very effective in making it combat ineffective. And then comes the operational chain of command, which is very crucial. In case of Russia, it's basically a monolith. It starts from the Kremlin, and then you have the military commanders, the Ministry of Defense, coming down to their tank armies or the mechanized armies, divisions, corps, and then down to brigade and battalion, down to the private or the soldier. But in case of Ukraine, this chain of command is very, very tricky, because it is now dependent on advisors which are sitting in Brussels, and then there are people from the West, from NATO and US advisors which are sitting maybe at Lviv or at Kyiv, who are doing the higher direction of war as well as control of the battlefield. So it becomes very, very difficult for any national army to follow orders, because they're coming from different directions. So that has been, I think, a major concern, especially when there were news of one of the Ukrainian senior commanders, Zaluzny, getting injured, and there was no news regarding his surviving. Same is true that in one of the operations, Russians targeted a lot of brigade and senior headquarters with massive firepower. So a lot of general staff, I think, was taken out. So it means the command was disrupted. So it boils down to the battalion and company commanders who are basically newly trained, newly inducted, to do something on the battlefield. That's where the counteroffensive, the so-called counteroffensive by Ukraine comes into light, because their employment of armor could have been done concentrated, selecting precise points of application, and then basically making a decisive move. But that was missing. Initially we saw at Bakhmut where they could basically muster 3 to 4 brigades to defend the fortress. They had literally shoved more than 7 to 8 brigades, and if you look at surrounding areas, there were 10 brigades which were fighting in Bakhmut, and then it was made a prestige point. The armor also had a lot of losses. So I think the operational command plays a very important role, and NATO and Ukraine has to look into it. How do they basically strengthen this chain of command? Then we come to the employment strategy. Now, if you look at Russia, the area captured is basically sort of a wall, with the, if you look from top to let's say Zaporizhia, it's a constant defensive line that they have built, and this is in, I think, 3 layers. So east of the Dnieper River, wherever the Russians could lean forward, they have built almost a formidable wall. So in case the Ukrainians want to, let's say, do something meaningful, they've got to phase their operation, cross the Dnieper River, do the Battle of Frontiers, clear the security zone, and then start denting. So that has been found missing. In a nutshell, so far, the losses on both sides have been heavy, but I think Ukrainians, despite they have fought well, but have suffered a lot because of these, reasons. There's also news of, some additional tanks coming from US, that is the M1 Abrams. I think Challengers have been inducted, but we've not seen much of them. So it has been basically an employment in penny packets. Ideally, they could have built formation like mechanized divisions, or at least, number of mechanized brigades, but they've not been able to concentrate that. Then, of course, is the way Russians have moved forces into Belarus, because Wagner Group has moved it. I think we'll do a detailed study of what is the impact of Wagner Group on the overall situation. But if you look at overall strategic situation of Ukraine, it is now operating on interior lines, and the Russians have placed their forces on exterior lines. We start from Belarus, the north east part of it, Donbas region and Zaporizhia coming down to Crimea. So it's like basically Ukraine is surrounded from both sides. On the maritime, I think theater also, there's a dominance because Ukraine has lost almost 80% of its seaboard. So these are some of the challenges that we see, and on ground, both sides are claiming because of the information operation, the successes, but by and large, I think Leopard 2 has not been able to create an impact because of the reason that I have talked. And we expect, in case NATO and Ukraine wants to do well, that they should do a mid-course correction and then come up with some better strategy. Thank you very much.